Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap in mercy. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he comes and rains righteousness on you. No, wait, I thought he had seriously and completely condemned the nation of Israel for their sins. Is he offering them hope now? Tell you what, why not get out your Bible? Maybe join me in a cup of coffee, and we can look at this together in today's Bible class.
Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day.
Our reading begins with the first verse of Hosea chapter 10. Israel empties his vine. He brings forth fruit for himself. According to the multitude of his fruit, he has increased the altars. According to the bounty of his land, they have embellished his sacred pillars. Their heart is divided. Now are they held guilty. He will break down their altars. He will ruin their sacred pillars. For now they say, we have no king, because we do not fear God. And as for a king, what would he do for us? They have spoken words, swearing falsely and making a covenant. Thus judgment springs up like hemlock in the furrows of the field. The inhabitants of Samaria fear because of the calf of Bethaven. For its people mourn for it, and its priests shriek for it, because its glory has departed from it. The idol also shall be carried to Assyria as a present for King Jareb. Ephraim shall receive shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of his own counsel. As for Samaria, her king is cut off like a twig on the water. Also the high places of Avon, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. The thorn and the thistle shall grow on their altars. They shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah. There they stood. The battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. When it is my desire, I will chastise them. People shall be gathered against them when I bind them for their two transgressions. Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh grain. But I harnessed her fair neck. I will make Ephraim pull a plow. Judah shall plow. Jacob shall break his clods. Sow for yourselves righteousness. Reap in mercy. Break up your fallow ground. For it is time to seek the Lord till he comes and rains righteousness on you. You have plowed wickedness. You have reaped iniquity. You have eaten the fruit of lies, because you trusted in your own way and the multitude of your mighty men. Therefore, tumult shall arise among your people, and all your fortresses shall be plundered, as Shalman plundered Beth Arban in the day of battle, a mother dashed in pieces upon her children. Thus it shall be done to you, O Bethel, because of your great wickedness. At dawn, the king of Israel shall be cut off utterly. That's verses 1 through 15 of the 10th chapter of the book of Hosea. May God bless the reading of his word. As we completed our study of chapter 9 of the book of Hosea our last time together, couldn't help but notice how grim, how final things looked for that northern kingdom called Israel. Through the prophet Hosea, God has told them Ephraim is stricken. Their root is dried up. They shall bear no fruit. He goes on to say, the last part of that verse, verse 16, yes, were they to bear children, I would kill the darlings of their womb. And as you begin chapter 10, things really don't look all that much better. It begins with what is almost a confusing statement. Israel empties his vine, according to the New King James. If you're reading it in the King James Version, Israel is an empty vine. Or if you're reading the American Standard or perhaps the English Standard Version, it's even more different. Israel is a luxuriant vine. Now, all those seem, the first three and this one, they seem to be somewhat different, almost contradictory. When you look at the Hebrew here, the word that's translated empty or luxuriant, Israel, and the word there is bocha. Bocha. It means to pour out, literally. The idea is to pour out or to empty, or you could use it as, apparently it is used here with the idea of spilling over. Israel is a vine that spills over. Israel empties his vine. It is so full, it spills over. But the problem being, he brings forth fruit for himself. He brings forth no fruit for others. He brings forth no fruit for God. His only concern in the fruit that he has, the fruit that is so plentiful that it actually falls out upon the ground, is not the poor, it's not the needy, it is not to those who are seeking to follow God. It is only for himself. Are you reminded of a certain rich fool, as he's called, that we read about in the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 16 through 21? We're told of this man whose fields, he was rich to begin with. His fields brought forth abundantly, and he was faced with a quandary. He didn't have enough room to store it all. And he asked himself, what shall I do? Then he determined, he came to a conclusion. I will tear down my barns and build greater. And there will I put all my substance and all my goods. And I will say, verse 19, I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But then verse 20, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will be those things which you have provided? Remember, the accumulation of material things doesn't stave off death. The accumulation of material things does not guarantee a long life. And most especially, the acquisition of material things does not prove that one is pleasing or acceptable unto God. And so Jesus concludes that parable by saying, so is he who lays up treasure for himself, but he's not rich toward God. Israel was a luxuriant vine. He was a vine who spilled over. He actually emptied himself. But he brings forth his fruit only for himself. According to the multitude of his fruit, he's increased the altars. Matter of fact, he goes on to say, according to the bounty of his land, they have embellished his sacred pillars. Here he talks about the more that Israel gets, the more Israel uses, but not for God. The more they use it to build pagan altars, altars to make believe, to false, to pretend gods. And the more they use it to decorate, to spruce up, to make more lovely and beautiful the places of worship that they have built for gods other than the God of heaven. So verse 2, he says, their heart is divided. That has been their problem from the beginning. They cannot make up their mind to give themselves wholly to God. They want to keep him on the outskirts. They want to keep his blessings. They want to keep his goodness upon them, but they're not willing to give him of themselves. They're not willing to give him their obedience. They're not willing to give him their loyalty. They're not willing to give him their love, their hearts, or their lives. Their heart is divided. It's a problem that had been with Israel from very long ago. Go back to the book of Joshua. This is Joshua chapter 24. Joshua is making his farewell address to the nation of Israel. Now, this is the whole of the people. They have finally entered the promised land. They have taken the promised land. It is theirs. And now as Joshua lays aside this role of leadership, as he lays aside this task that had been given to him, he challenges the people, if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, then choose you this day whom you will serve. They don't have to make up their mind. They can't be divided. 100 years or more down the line, a prophet by the name of Elijah also assembles the nation, this time the northern kingdom of Israel, and he would challenge them. They had given themselves so much to Baal worship. And so Elijah would question them, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. If Baal be God, then follow him. The heart of this people was divided. They were not willing to give their hearts completely and fully to the God who had chosen them, who had blessed them, who had kept them up to this time. And God says, now they're held guilty. They have been divided their entire existence, and now they will be held guilty. They will be held responsible. God says, I will judge them on the basis of it. I'm going to break down their altars. I'm going to ruin their sacred pillars. God says, I will tolerate it no more. I will tolerate it no more. These false altars, when the Assyrians come in and the Assyrians punish this land according to my will, all these old altars, all these false gods, they will be done away. The sacred pillars will be ruined. Verse 3, they're coming up basically with an excuse. For now they say, we have no king because we did not fear the Lord. And that's true. That's why they didn't have a king. It's why they didn't have the king they were supposed to have. You'll remember back in the days of Samuel, when Saul became the first king of Israel, because the nation of Israel wanted to be like the nations round about them. And so they rejected God from being king. And then later on with Rehoboam and Jeroboam, when the nations rejected the rulership of Rehoboam, they decided they would also reject the worship of God. And so Jeroboam the first, would erect 2 temples, 2 golden calves, one in the north of his land, one in the south of his land. And there they would bring their worship. There they would offer their piety. There they would offer their obedience, claiming that these were the gods who brought them forth out of Egypt. They had no king. They didn't have a legitimate king. And time would come when they would not have a king at all of it because they didn't fear God. And then going on to the latter part of verse 3, they would ask, and as for a king, what would he do for us? You know, that's a deeper question. That's a more significant question than they might realize when it was asked. Because in the face of God, in the face of God's justice, in the face of God's judgment, what can a king do for you? We go down the corridors of time a little over 100 years, and we find 3 faithful servants of God who basically deal with that question. They answer that question to an angry king by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. Those 3 men, of course, are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is in Daniel 3. Nebuchadnezzar has reared up a golden image, and he has commanded all the officers of the land, the princes, the governors, all the important officials, to fall down and to worship this image which he has made, which 3 men refused to do: Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And in his fury, he lets them know that if they do not fall down and worship, he reminds them they shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And he ends that tirade with this question: and who is the God who shall deliver you from my hands? The 15th verse of Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, apparently they're not set back a bit. They are totally unflappable in the face of the king's fury. They answer, O king, we're not careful to answer you in this manner. Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. Verse 18, but if not, be it known unto you that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image that you have set up. In the face of God, no king stands. What is it that a king could do for us in the face of God's displeasure, of his justice, of his judgment? Truly, there's nothing that king could do for them. He goes on in verse 4 to say that the people of Israel, they have spoken words. And how many Bible verses could we quote that talk about how much our tongues, our words can get us in trouble? They've spoken words, but here in particular, he points out they have sworn falsely in making a covenant. A covenant is a contract. It is an agreement. They have sworn that they will do certain things, that they will keep certain requirements. And here particularly, he may be talking about the covenant that God had with his people Israel. They have sworn falsely in making that covenant because they would not keep it. Thus, judgment springs up like hemlock in the furrows of a field. Because you swore falsely, because you didn't keep the terms of the covenant that we agreed upon. The consequences, the judgment, is as natural as hemlock springing up in the furrows of a field. The word hemlock there. And the last time I was dealing with this, talking with someone about it, interestingly enough, they didn't know what hemlock was. So let's take just a moment. Hemlock, in the Hebrew, it is the word rosh. And you'll find quite a few versions of the Old Testament, a few translations of the Old Testament that will render that more of the idea of poisonous or bitter herbs or bitter fruit. And that may be what it means, but hemlock may well be a good translation of this. Hemlock was indeed a native plant to that part of the country. We call it hemlock. The proper name is Conium maculatum. All parts of the plant are toxic, especially the seeds and the roots, and most especially if they're ingested, if you eat them or make a drink out of them, boil them, and drink it. Hemlock may be best known in the Western world as the poison that killed the philosopher Socrates after his trial in ancient Greece. He was found guilty. He was sentenced to death. The method he chose, he drank hemlock. He boiled some hemlock berries, hemlock leaves, I think it was hemlock root, and drank it in the presence of his students. He died. Hemlock is not something that you want growing in your field. It's not something that you want harvested with your crop. It is a deadly poison. And he says, because that they have sworn falsely, hemlock is going to come up. Judgment will come just as naturally as hemlock will grow. And those that study crops and nature say, yes, this will readily grow in the cultivated lands of what we call the Middle East, around the Mediterranean, the land of Israel. We go to verse 5. He says, the inhabitants of Samaria fear because of the calf of Bethaven. That calf would be one of the two golden calves set up by Jeroboam the first. Bethaven was a name given later to what had been Bethel. Bethel, you'll remember, is the place where Jacob saw the vision of a stairway or a ladder reaching up to heaven with angels going up it and coming down it. He called it Bethel, the house of God. It became a sacred place and a place of worship. It was also one of the two places that Jeroboam decided he would rear up his own temple and his own altar. He says the inhabitants of Samaria. Samaria was the capital city of that northern kingdom of Israel. They fear. They fear because of the calf of Bethaven. Well, why? The people mourn for it. The priests shriek for it. And here the idea of shrieking in mourning and shrieking in grief. We have seen people just break down in times of great turmoil and grief, and we've heard sometimes the wailing of those who feel so bereft, who feel so much loss. Well, that's describing the priest. The people of that northern kingdom, they mourn for this calf. The priests, they shriek for it. Why? Because its glory has departed from it. Whatever it was they thought they saw in it, especially in the way of deliverance, they were seeing it no more. It was becoming too clear that this golden statue, this chunk of metal, could not protect them from the coming wrath of God from the nation of Assyria. Its glory has departed from it. He goes on in verse 6, the idol, and he just plainly calls it the idol, it shall be carried to Assyria as a present for King Jareb. Now, there is no King Jareb that we can read of historically in the nation of Assyria. This seems to be more of a description or a title. The idea here is a contender. a contender, someone who is provocative, someone who wants to start a fight. It has been given, and perhaps given as an appeasement, to a king who was coming down, who was seeking to conquer the land. The people are mourning. The priests are screaming. They're shrieking for it. They are afraid because the calf not only cannot protect them, it couldn't even protect itself. It was given away as a present for King Jareb of Assyria. So Ephraim shall receive shame, and Israel should be ashamed of his own counsel. As they look back over what they have done, the decisions they have made, as they look at their present circumstances and consequences, there's not anything they're going to be proud of. It's not going to be anything that they take honor in. When they look at their disobedience, when they look at the fact that they have been forsworn in keeping that covenant, when they look back how they have treated, how they have rejected the God of heaven, shame will be the result. Ephraim shall receive shame. Israel shall be ashamed of his own counsel. Verse 7, as for Samaria, again, all this is referencing the same thing. Ephraim, Israel, Samaria. This is all the northern kingdom. As for Samaria, her king is cut off like a twig on the water. Take a small stick, put it in a stream. There's no stability. It just flows on down with the water. It is cut off like a twig that's been cast onto a river, onto a stream, and it's carried away. Verse 8, also the high places of Aven, again a reference back here to Beth Aven or Bethel. The sin of Israel shall be destroyed. Beth Aven is going to be leveled. There will be nothing left of that false worship that's been done there. He goes on to describe its aftermath. The thorn and the thistle shall grow on their altars. Indeed, the altars themselves, or if they had a voice, they would say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. The shame that they would feel over the decision they had made to leave the true God, true and living God, to a false and inanimate God. And if the altars themselves could speak, they would ask to be hidden from sight so that no one could see the shame that had been heaped upon them. Verse 9, O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah. And we talked about that earlier. That city of the tribe of Benjamin, in which such horrendous sin, such horrendous perversion, and then such cataclysmic vengeance took place. You have sinned from the days of Gibeah. And he goes on there to say, there they stood. The battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. There was a battle. It almost totally led to the extinction of the tribe of Benjamin, because instead of condemning this wickedness, this perversion, the tribe as a whole stood up to defend the men of Gibeah. They stood up to defend the wickedness that had gone on there. And they think that the battle's not going to overtake them. The battle is not going to touch them. But in the battle against good, or the battle of good against evil, don't think you can stand on the sidelines. Don't think you can stand and watch. As Jesus said, he that is not with me is against me. So verse 10, God says, when it's my desire, I will chasten them. They thought, the children of iniquity, they did survive. There were plans made to bring back the resurgence of the tribe of Benjamin, and that wickedness still goes on in our world today, both of perversion and of violence and of rape. All those things are still exist today. God tells them, when it's my desire, I'll chastise them. These children of iniquity, these who sin like in Gibeah, people shall be gathered against them when I bind them for their two transgressions. God says this is not going to be done quietly. This is not going to be done in a closet. People shall be gathered against them when I bind them for their two transgressions. And again, those two transgressions appeared to be the time that they rejected God as their king because they wanted a physical king to be like the nations round about them. And secondly, when they rejected God when the kingdoms divided and Jeroboam began his own religions. I will bind them for their two transgressions. He turns now to a more agricultural illustration here. Ephraim, again, one of the tribes of the northern kingdom, which is many times in the Old Testament used metaphorically to describe the nation as a whole. Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh grain. But I harnessed her fair neck. I will make Ephraim pull a plow. Judah shall plow. Jacob shall break his clods. Well, for those of us who have been raised a little bit more sophisticated than that, shall we say, we may not be all that familiar with what's being talked about here. Well, in the Middle East and in some places still today, cattle are still used to thresh wheat. They're used to thresh grain, and basically what has happened is the grain is heaped up and the cow is allowed to walk around through that, and as he walks on it, it separates the wheat from the chaff. It separates the grain from the chaff. It is many ways of thinking about it for the cow. It's an ideal job. Under the Old Testament law, you couldn't muzzle the cow, the beast, the ox, it says in the Old Testament, that treads out the grain. So very easy, very luxurious. They just walk around when they want to. They take a bite, they can eat. Livestock that got this job tended to be a little bit fatter. They tended to be a little bit sleeker than the other livestock, because many times livestock had the job of plowing, and that's a much more difficult job. They're hitched to a plow. It's stuck in the ground, and they're trying to pull that plow through the ground. It's somewhat akin to the idea of trying to pull an anchor across the ground. As they're breaking up the ground, and it resists, it's tough, it may be dry, and they have to pull, and the ox goad, the cattle prod. We still have cattle prods today, only these days they tend to be more like tasers. They're a stick with an electric end, and you stick it and it shocks the cow. And the idea here is when they quit pulling, you give them a jab. This is not the most desirable job for the livestock on a farm. He said, Israel, you were trained. You were good at treading out the wheat, but now you're going to plow. Ephraim shall pull a plow. Judah shall pull a plow. Jacob shall break his clods. And one thing to note here, the inclusion of Judah, the southern kingdom. Primarily, Hosea's message was to that northern kingdom, but that was not exclusive. The warnings kept coming, and it comes here to Judah as well. Judah, I can harness you up. You can pull a plow just as well as Israel can. Jacob shall break his clods. And so he pleads with them. Hosea pleads with his people, sow for yourselves righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground. For it's time to seek the Lord till he comes and rains righteousness on you. Talking about the two parts that are necessary in cultivation. You got to plow, prepare the field, but the rain has got to come. And God will send the rain, and it will be a rain of righteousness. For those who seek the Lord, for those who will plow their fallow fields, they will make their hearts ready to receive that seed, that truth, the Word of God that lives and abides forever. Verse 13, the contrast. You have plowed wickedness, and you've reaped iniquity. What is it we read in the book of Galatians? What a man sows, that shall he also reap. That law can never be broken. Whatever it is we sow, that is what we will reap. One of the beautiful things about the forgiveness that's available in God is the chance to plow a new crop. The chance to sow a new crop that will bring forth a new produce, a new harvest. But Israel, you need to start plowing in righteousness, because you have plowed in wickedness. You have reaped iniquity. You have eaten the fruit of lies. Why? Because you trusted your own way in the multitude of your mighty men. Wise man Solomon told us, there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. Israel trusted in her own way. And she trusted in her mighty armies, the multitudes of her mighty men. You read back through the history of Israel, The armies of Israel accomplished some incredible and amazing things when God fought for them and God fought with them. But as men tend to do, they were beginning to take the credit upon themselves, and they trusted in the multitude of their own mighty men. What will the consequence of this be? Therefore tumult shall rise among your people, and all your fortresses shall be plundered, as Shalman plundered Beth Arbel in the day of battle. Your fortresses, those mighty forts that you've set up, those fortifications that you have prepared to keep you safe, they'll be plundered. They'll be robbed. They'll be pilfered, just like Shalman. There's some confusion over who that might be. Some think it's a shortening of the name Shalmaneser. Others think that perhaps it's a reference to a Moabitish king who at this time was already a vassal of Assyria, who may be acting against God's people here. His name was a version of Shalman. Beth Arbel, there were several names of Arbel. Beth is just simply house of. But Arbel, there were several cities villages called Arbel around that region. I don't know specifically which one, but Israel did. The people to whom Hosea wrote, they knew exactly what he was talking about. It was a lesson that would hit hard. They're going to be plundered just as Solomon plundered Beth Arbel in the day of battle. A mother dashed in pieces upon her children. The brutality of war. It's bad enough when it's soldier against soldier, but wars have collateral damage. And in our news, there is such a furor raised up, and rightly so, when innocents are brought in, when they're used either as shields or as distractions, but when the fruits, the effects of war hit directly upon the innocent. And in this case, it's a mother who has seen her children die, and her body's going to be heaped on top of it. She will be slain right on top of the bodies of her slain children. And so verse 15, the last verse of this chapter, thus it shall be done to you, O Bethel, because of your great wickedness. At dawn, the king of Israel shall be cut off utterly. I don't know if it's talking about specifically the next day or more. It's a reference to the idea that it's going to come. It will come unexpectedly, but it will come quickly. You know, battles many times usually were fought in the daylight so people could see what they were doing. Well, if the king's cut off at dawn, the battle didn't take too very long. It's going to be quick. It's going to be decisive. At dawn, the king of Israel shall be cut off utterly. And with that, we have reached the conclusion of chapter 10 of the book of Hosea. If you would be interested in increasing your own knowledge of the Bible, we have several resources that we would be happy to make available to you without charge and without obligation. Whether it's an in-home Bible study, or a digital or online Bible study, or a correspondence course, a study by mail. If you'd be interested in any of these ways of studying, please contact us at Bible Class 4255 Gore Subligna Road, Somerville, Georgia 30747, or email us at todaysbibleclass@gmail.com. You can also leave a text message at 706-290-4329. This